Hello, audio folk from around the globe. We'd like to welcome you to an episode of Studio Life with me, Dan Peters, and my colleague here, Sean Vincent.
How you doing?
Today, we're going to be looking at the usual sections that we like to go through during these Studio Life shows. What are we starting with today, Sean?
Well, starting with news, as we always do. Like to start with a bit of news.
Bit of news.
So some time ago, on one of these shows, I was talking about a little bit of trouble I ran into buying a couple of pieces of hardware. I was trying to buy a pair of the HRK ST552s, which are 500 series analog tape emulators. So, and I thought about this the other day. We were reviewing another analog tape emulator plugin. There's not many hardware tape emulators.
No.
And when I was trying to get hold of that, it was
I thought they were called tape machines.
Well, tape machines are expensive, break down a lot, noisy, hot, take up half the studio, all of that stuff. Obviously, you know.
I know girls like that.
What, they take up half the studio?
Yeah,
and
noisy,
and
hot.
And expensive. Fair point. Yeah, I think we all do.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a couple of different hardware tape emulators I saw, and one of which I was trying to get hold of for ages. Can't remember the name of it now, but just couldn't get hold of one. And then I saw these, and I thought, do you know what? I'll give it a go. They arrived, had a bit of trouble. One of them didn't work, dead on arrival. They fixed it, or sent me a new one. And I've been using these pair, left and right, in mastering quite a lot, and it's a very convincing analog tape sound. It's brilliant. You can have it very subtly, just a bit of sheen, or you can really push into it and get tape compression sounds. It's great, and you can choose between 15 inches per second, 30 inches per second.
Why is a hardware tape emulator any different from a software tape emulator
Because
if they're both emulating tape?
This is basically it has transformers in it. It's not emulating transformers. There are real transformers in it. Therefore, that's one less stage of emulating. It's doing it for real. The only bit it's emulating is the sound of tape, but it's doing that in an analog fashion, which tape was analog in the first place. So it should be better.
Okay.
Anyway.
I'll settle for that.
I'm very happy with it. I really like it. But I recently changed up how it's routed in my studio, and now I have it set up in mid-side. And that has changed everything, because now I basically into the mid section. It's strange. The VU meters on it have completely changed, obviously, now, because the section that's covering the mid, it's quite lively. There's a lot of signal passing through that, so I can get that to sit just where I like it, so that the bass and the kick, it's got a little bit of that tape warmth, but the high end sort of sheen that you get on tape, I can now push that onto the sides only, and it gives this massive wide stereo image.
So would you use a software tape emulator and a hardware?
No.
And your hardware?
No, I don't use a software one at all.
So you don't use a software one at all?
Nope, used to till I got these, and then stopped using it. I didn't use it very much because I'd never really liked any of them enough to do that.
Yeah.
Some of them were all right, but this was just such a big difference for me. I think it just immediately sounded better and more subtle. You know, I don't remember. Everyone remembers the problems with tape very well, but no one really fondly remembered the sound until we didn't have it anymore.
Well, this is what we've sort of been discussing recently, isn't it? We've tried ages to get away from it.
Yeah.
And then
you want it back, and it's very subtle, the thing that it does, but it does work. It is a similar thing to glue.
There was I was reading an article, not audio exactly, but I was reading. In fact, it was a Reddit post. Somebody had said, "Why can't I stream 28 days later?" And of course, then it breaks into a whole. You know, there's all these texts in there breaking down 28 days later. And there were two things. It was one shot handheld cam, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it was one of the first features not shot on film.
Yeah, it was shot on mini DV.
Yeah, and they were
we made a film at a similar time, shot the same way.
We did, but they were proud of the fact that it was shot on digital format and not film. And once again, the film industry has gone, it's been like, now we want to be shooting on film again.
Well, it's kind of split,
or the quality of film.
But that's another industry.
Yes. Okay.
But yes, a similar thing.
Yeah.
Similar thing. There's
There's
a renaissance of old technology. People looking back on it fondly, and all the rest of it.
And as AI starts making the tunes for us, digital music.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll move further back. You mentioned the Renaissance, back into this sort of analog kit and performance, and
yeah, maybe.
And
Maybe. It's got to be said, a lot of the plugins I like do mess the sound up to the point of it sounds like sounds I was desperately trying to get away from.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, I remember my first studio I had in my house when I was a teenager. It was a 4-track cassette, and I used to bounce to a stereo cassette. And I remember going to buy a really cheap and horrible graphic equalizer to put it in between so that I could try and get rid of some of the hiss.
Yeah,
just by EQing out all the top end, because there was so much hiss, and hiss isn't really a thing anymore. We don't have tape hiss. There's no such thing.
No.
It was the bane of my life.
Yes. There we go.
Anyway, that was news.
News.
So now the news is done, that must mean it's time for plug-in news.
Plug-in news.
So we do all different things in plug-in news. Sometimes we talk about plugins, and sometimes we do a top 5. And when we do a top 5, Dan gets very excited.
I do, because I get to go, and I wonder whether we could work a graphic, into this, Sean.
What?
I should keep meaning to say
What
things.
you mean, unlike the one I already do? Do you ever watch the show?
Yeah. No, I do, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, unlike. Yeah, I do mean unlike.
You mean better than the one we have, which I just stole off YouTube? You mean a
Anyway.
proper graphic?
What top 5 are we looking at today, Sean?
I thought we'd look at the top 5 reverbs, but not any old reverb.
Yeah.
Reverbs with character. There's loads of standard reverbs out there that will do all the bog standard jobs. But I like reverbs with character that are a little bit different.
Yeah.
So it's the top 5 character reverb.
Character-based reverbs.
Yes.
And in one,
No, we start 5.
do we?
We go the other way.
I do watch it, I promise.
I'm not sure you do. I watch it loads while I'm editing it normally.
In 5.
In at number 5, we have one we only just reviewed recently.
Yeah.
Which is the Safari Pedals Flamingo Verb.
Big fan of Safari.
Love their stuff. It's a really exciting, fun
Yeah.
thing to mess with. You get great sounds very easily.
Skeptical at first.
Very sceptical about their whole plug-in stuff at first, but actually love pretty much everything they do.
We did one recently which was a gate and a reverb in a pedal, didn't we? That
Dirty Dog Reverb.
The Dirty Dog reverb.
That was awesome.
Mental.
That-
yeah.
I mean, that could have been 6 if there had been a 6.
If there'd have been a 6, it'd have been a Dirty Dog.
There you go. So Safari Pedals, number 5.
In 4.
In at number 4 is the TC Electronic DVR 250, which is sat there. It's the one with the little hardware controller.
Yeah.
That looks like the old plate. It was the old EMT thing, and it's interesting because it has a controller. You're more likely to mess with it. That's the way I look at it. When I use it, I immediately go to start playing with the controller, rather than just fire up a preset and leave it alone.
Do you find you use it a lot?
I use it on almost every mix I do, pretty much. It's interesting at short reverbs.
Yeah.
I really like short reverbs. If I'm going to do a lush vocal thing, I'll use something else, which we'll come to in a minute. But for short, interesting little rooms and stuff, I love that.
Brilliant stuff.
Very cool. And the little controller's awesome.
I think tactile, isn't it?
Tactile,
That's the
yeah.
thing,
Something to
bit of a change.
get involved with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in 3.
In.
You got? I thought a little 3 here or something.
Okay.
Yeah, if you've got the time.
I can see what I can conjure up.
No pressure.
No pressure. In at number 3 is the Valhalla plate. Valhalla do a bunch of reverbs. They're all really cool. They're really good value for money. But the plate, I think, is just excellent. Sounds great. Really easy to use their stuff. Beautiful tails on it. Really nice quality. Good.
Good stuff. Big fan of the Valhalla.
Big fan of the Valhalla.
In 2.
In at number 2 is our old friends PSP Audioware.
Oh, good friends.
And they have the PSP 2445. It's the EMT, the digital reverb that was basically a 5U rack or something back in the day. It's a perfect recreation of that. And again, it does small rooms very well. It does interesting things. And the weird thing about it is that the original was digital. So their emulation of it is perfect because it's zeros and ones. It's the same. And we like PSP. Looks great. Sounds great.
They haven't done much for a while, have they, PSP?
Oh, they've been busy.
Have they?
Yeah.
Have we got some stuff coming up?
Stuff coming up soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zip that one then for now. Which brings us to Bully's special prize.
In at number 1 is the Relab LX480.
I knew that was going to be number 1. If it wasn't number 2, yeah.
It's got to be, isn't it? I mean, when we first reviewed it, I'd been using it for a little while and had a few issues with reliability, and I really regret putting that video out because that was my fault. I just hadn't updated it, and since it's been updated, it's been running like a dream. This thing sounds exactly like a Lexicon LX480. It works the same. I think it's the same algorithms. Sounds absolutely beautiful. If you want those big, lush vocal reverbs, or those really interesting little ambiences that Lexicon are good at, this thing completely nails them, and the controller works very similarly to the Lark used to, but even better. There's more information on it, there's more control, and I think it's a damn good price. It goes on sale a lot, so keep an eye out.
Wicked stuff. There we go. From the Midlands, won a speedboat.
It's true, isn't it? They always won a speedboat.
They did. They're now, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, they're now internationally famous Studio Life top 5 reverbs done.
Top 5 reverbs done. Which means it must be time, Dan,
for
Retro Talk.
Retro Talk. Now, we had to switch this Retro Talk up, didn't we?
We switched it up on the last episode, and we're staying switched up.
Yeah,
so
we are.
We were talking about old gear we used to use and missed, and maybe we still used it. And we kind of ran out of gear to talk about a little bit. So we've changed it up. So now we're talking about tunes from the past.
Yeah.
That influenced us in a special way in becoming sound engineers and working in music and stuff. So we're talking about retro tunes.
Yeah. In the hope that also there might be some discussion in the comments related to these tunes, some additional knowledge.
That'd be great.
We're picking tunes that are seminal tunes in certain genres.
Yep.
That people will know.
Yeah.
And that people could talk about.
Yeah, exactly that. So, Dan, do you want to go first?
I can do.
What tune are you bringing to us?
Well, you know, I'm a bit of a Bob Dylan fan. Really, this is my father. It comes from my father's about his biggest fan, actually. And I've been playing my acoustic guitar a bit. You know, we were talking about recording guitars and stuff, weren't we? Anyway, and this is one of the tunes that I sort of play a bit, and it's called Things Have Changed. It's quite a big Bob Dylan tune from the film The Wonder Boys in '95, starred Michael Douglas. So it was a single, May the 1st, 2000.
Wow.
It was an Academy Award for Best Original Song and a Golden Globe. So there might be a few people that have heard of it. But it's one of these cool versions, like a lot of Dylan stuff. There's a lot of discussion and disputes around when it was recorded, not who played on it as such, because it's generally... In fact, I was reading, again, I'm a bit of a Reddit nerd, and you read about these things that you're fans of, and Dylan generally records in the fall periods of his tour. He's on the sort of never-ending tour.
Okay, yeah.
And he'll obviously be working on stuff. He's renowned for having a studio on his bus, and he'll be recording and demoing, and then he'll say to the band, right, we're in New York this week, we're going to pop into the studio tomorrow. And this was very much one of those tunes. It was recorded in Sony Studios in New York. The personnel were Charlie Sexton and Larry Campbell on guitars, Tony Garner on bass, and David Kemper on drums, which is to be remembered because the drums were quite a large part of this. So it's my kind of recording. I'm a big fan of rooms. I'm a big fan of being able to close your eyes with your headphones on and feel like you're in the room with the people that played the tune. And on this, there's two guitars, but and Dylan's obviously playing, and you know, when Dylan plays, you just have to, you keep up with Dylan. And, you know, and there was in 5 hours, this was learned, rehearsed and recorded. Two takes, both of which have been released, I believe.
Wow.
So there was the main mix that was released that won the awards and was the soundtrack. But there's a very interesting thing that if you listen to the main release, the soundtrack release, there's a really loud egg shaker on it.
Oh, you were saying, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I'd always assumed it was this guy Ray Cooper. You know, you see him. You know, I just assumed that every egg shaker you ever hear, or every
plays with Elton,
he's
with Clapton and everyone. Yeah.
So, but the engineer Chris Shaw sort of talks about how they're in there and they'd made this amazing recording and it'd gone really well. 5 hours learnt, 2 takes done, 2 passes done. And they'd got in David Kemper is in doing his egg shaker, and Bob hadn't been present since laying down his vocals. Walked in, turned up the egg shaker 10 dB, and that was the mix that went to master. And if you go and listen to that track now, the Egg Shaker is
It's like more cowbell.
it's got
More Egg Shaker.
got to have more Egg Shaker.
Damn.
But it's interesting, you know, the egg, and I sort of wanted to discuss this a bit, because the Egg Shaker is a producer's greatest trick.
Oh yeah.
You know, and even on albums like the Metallica Black album,
Yep.
you know, the Sad But True, you know, these very heavy and very empty tracks, you learn that just in they just sit a 16th Egg Shaker.
Drive things along.
And it just drives the whole
Yeah,
tune along.
true.
Yeah.
I know a lot of engineers who will keep an Egg Shaker close by, set up a mic and just whack it down over a mix
Yeah.
fairly last minute.
Yeah.
Just for exactly that reason.
Yeah. So Bob Dylan, things have changed. If you want to hear a loud Egg Shaker, that's the place to go.
And interestingly, from a mix point of view, an Egg Shaker is really easy to sit.
It does.
Tambourine's a nightmare.
Tambourine is a disaster because you get the chicka chicka whack.
Yeah. Exactly. And the whack just makes...
Yeah. Yeah, so next time you're doing a track, if you're not an Egg Shaker fan, you're not familiar with the Egg Shaker trick, go and have a go with an Egg Shaker.
Good tip.
And record it on a mic.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, don't drag in a loop.
No.
Play it. You can just play something really interesting and loop
16ths
it.
on an Egg Shaker. So there you go. Things have changed, Bob Dylan. That was my retro talk.
That's
track.
a good one. Blimey. I've got a lot to live up to there. Okay, so I'm going with a track from 1991, which is weird. I didn't think it would be older, being yours as Bob Dylan, but it is older. This is a track by a band called Bomb the Bass, one of my favourite bands from back in the day. And it's a track called Winter in July. I was lucky enough to be in the studio while they were mixing it. It was my first job. I think it might have been my first week working in the studio. I was there helping a bit, making tea maybe, zeroing the desk in between stuff, but you know, I wasn't actually doing too much, but I was there helping as much as I could. And it was a mind-blowing experience, to be honest, because I was a fan already, and then to be in the studio with Tim Simonton was there with all these synths, and I remember he had some really rare synths, stuff at the time no one else was using because it wasn't cool, but I remember he had an Alpha Juno, and I remember looking at it going, no one uses that. And then I heard the sound he got out, and I'm like, everyone should be using it. You know, it's like he was first to discover all these classic old synths, and he had an amazing collection of samples on 3.5 inch discs. And I don't know if you remember the edge of a 3.5 inch disc. It was tiny, and yet he wrote everything that was on it on that bit.
Did he?
So that he could see it from the end as he was shuffling through it.
No.
And there was hundreds of them, hundreds of these discs.
Do you remember the cases with the key lock?
Yeah, he had it all in those stacks of them. Stacks of them. I had one case of samples. He had like 20. But it was amazing. Yeah, so it was mixed at Matrix, where I used to work, in Little Russell Street, in Studio 3. We had 3 studios in Matrix, and Studio 3 was the main mix room. It had a G Series SSL, 64 channel. I think we had Westlake monitors, you know, for the main monitors, and we had NS10s, obviously. It was a beautiful studio. It was the nicest studio. It was the one where everyone wanted to mix most of the time. So this was done in there. Vocals by Loretta Haywood, who years later we tracked down and got her to come and sing on a track that I wrote with Ricky Wilde on an album we did, which was amazing. On the production side of things, there was Kerry Hopwood and Guy Sigsworth working on keyboards and samples and all that kind of stuff. And Guy went on to work with Madonna and Ray of Light and stuff like that. This, you know, it was a real sort of launch pad for him, I think, this album and this song in particular.
Can I cut in there?
Yeah.
Have you seen any of the Madonna tour?
I have, yeah.
What do you think? Me too. Go on.
Let's leave that there. Yeah. Mixed by Alan Moulder, who I think, as mixes go, it's right up there. And I remember at the time seeing them use this kit, got brought in and taken out of boxes and set up. And I was 17 when I worked there, but I still knew what most things. I knew what a compressor looked like, what an EQ looked like, blah blah blah. I didn't know what this thing was, and they set it up, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, what the hell are they doing? And it was one of the other engineers in a bit of downtime. I said, what is that? And it was called the Roland RSS Space Sound System. And it was a very, very early version of like immersive audio, but it worked with just stereo speakers. And it basically had a bunch of rotary dials in it, 8 rotary dials. And you could move sound around between left and right, backwards and forwards, and rotating it as well.
Really?
And you could automate it. So there was there was a sound in the middle 8. If you listen to Winter in July now, go and listen to it on Spotify or wherever it is. There's a sound in the middle 8 in a breakdown. and it sounds like a sonar ping, like from a submarine. It's quite loud. That was supposed to be sounding like it was coming out from under your left armpit. And if you sit at the right place in the stereo field, it does. And there's other sounds, you'll hear little samples, and it's all around your head. And it's really weird in that it was...
What was it? The
Roland RSS Space Sound System.
Wow.
And they put a real cheap version of it into their hard disk recorders. I ended up getting one. And it didn't really work as well.
No.
But it was a bit like Q Sound. Remember Q Sound? That was another thing.
Vaguely, yeah.
Which is all Madonna tracks were mixed in Q Sound. It was kind of like a pseudo...
Surround sound
kind of vibe. But yeah, really interesting. And I think they ended up doing a special version of Tomorrow's World. Do you remember that on UK TV years ago? All the latest developments. I think Bomb the Bass were on there demonstrating this RSS system.
Awesome.
So really interesting. And the other interesting thing about it is that it's always been a bit of an argument between people that were into music from that era as to what was the first song that started the genre trip hop. It wasn't labelled trip hop till years later. It was just people didn't know what it was. But it was either this, Winter in July by Bomb the Bass, or Unfinished Sympathy by Massive Attack.
Yes.
And the interesting thing about it is they were being mixed at the same time in the same studio.
Place. Yeah.
And I was sort of in between. 1 minute it's Massive Attack, next minute it's Bomb the Bass, and it was like they invented a genre of music. They just didn't realise they were doing it. It's really, really cool. Anyway, I still listen to that a lot. I think it's an amazing mix. It's one of those things where I don't think it would happen now. It wasn't. I mean, it was pop music, but it wasn't house, and it wasn't. It was just a beautiful song recorded in a beautiful way, and using very modern techniques at the time.
We talk about that now, don't we? Trying to make music, and you kind of feel restricted by
genre,
and then sort of genre and then tempo.
Yeah.
Because if
Whereas
you change
they just
tempo,
thought, sod that, we'll make a little genre.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah.
2 tracks to go and have a listen to there. I'm sure you're familiar with them both, but if you're not, go and have a listen.
Yeah, definitely go and have a listen. So that must mean it's time for our hot topic.
Hot topic.
It's hot topic. Today's hot topic. We're gonna go deep. How deep? Well, I don't know. I guess we'll just see how deep it goes.
I don't actually know what this is this week.
Well, I decided not to tell you. I thought it was more fun. Hot topic this week is, what do we all think of Dan? No, it's not really.
That'd be pretty quick.
So the hot topic this week is, when you pay someone to mix for you, what do you expect? What should you deliver?
Yeah.
And how much do you think you should pay?
Okay. Wow.
So let's start with, what would you expect? Let's say, obviously me and you are both engineers. We mix our own stuff. Yeah. If for whatever reason you're busy, or you want a different sound, so you're giving it to someone else. Yeah. What do you expect?
Okay, so first of all, you do the initial chat.
Yep.
What system are you working in?
Yep.
Do you want dry stems or wet stems?
Okay.
And do you
So explain that. What's a wet stem?
So a wet stem is a stem with the effects on it.
Reverbs, delays.
Reverbs and delays. Generally, a dry stem is still compressed and EQ'd, I would say. But effects, time-based effects, not included. I might be wrong. That's how I would consider a dry stem.
Okay.
And then just to talk through sending over the stems and just communication. I think that's the big thing. Yeah. In the first instance.
Okay, interesting. And do you think that you would pick someone to mix your track based on what they've mixed already?
Yeah.
Or based on them doing something you're going to like because you've worked with them before? Do you know what I mean? Would you pick someone, let's say you were doing this a lot, would you pick someone that you're not sure you like their stuff and you're not familiar with it, but maybe they'll do something you haven't thought of?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad you've asked me that. I've got to say, it's a bit like going to a restaurant.
Yep. You know what you like.
Yeah, but I like good food, and I want my mix to be good. Yeah. But I want the service. Yeah, the service is important. So I want somebody I can communicate with. Yeah. So if I get a mix back, and I want to be able to go and feed back to the person that's mixed it without getting any, I don't want to say attitude, but rebuttal.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I think being able to be clear and concise about what you want,
Yep.
and then being able to accept feedback from the person that's mixing it is probably equally important.
Okay, let's reverse the whole thing.
Yes.
Back to our jobs as doing that for other people.
Yeah.
Do you find it challenging when you send a mix back to someone and they want changes? Do you take it personally?
I do sometimes. I find it difficult, if I'm honest. Again, it depends on the way that it's communicated.
Yeah.
Because I think you've got to have an understanding. So, I mean, if you're mixing, you know, you've got to understand what's the feature of the track. So if it's a vocal track, your vocal's the feature. Top line is the feature. You know, the hook is the feature. So you've got to make sure that that's the prominent part of the track.
Yes.
Yeah. If it's a drum and bass track, how heavy do you want the drums to be?
Yep.
You know, you've got to be in an agreement about the prominent parts within the track that you're mixing.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding what your client wants from the mix. And if you're not going to it's not about you've got to give your opinion, but it's like it's a surgical thing, isn't it?
Yep.
But I think often being a mix engineer, yes, it's creative in some respects, but generally the creativity is done and you've just got to make the creativity look good.
Yeah. I think there's two kinds of clients. I think there's the kind of client that knows exactly what they want to hear and they want you to facilitate that because they can't.
Yeah.
So they will tell you in extreme detail what they want and you're just there to make that happen. You're literally just a buffer between them and the equipment because they can't do it. And those sessions are sometimes really difficult. You have to completely let go and become completely dispassionate about it.
Yeah.
You know, and you're just there to get the sounds they want. And then there's other clients who basically trust you and like what you've done. So therefore they want you to do what you would do.
Yeah.
And I think it took me a long time to be unprecious.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, this is the thing.
I think the first time I got hired to do a mix ever, years ago, I was massively overly precious.
Yeah.
When the artist didn't like it as was. I mean, to be fair, they didn't want many changes, but they wanted enough changes that I was affronted.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But I've made the decision that that's what that should sound like. You know.
So here we go. This is a thing. So you talk about scenarios now. So if you've got you've got your client in the room while you're mixing the track, it's different than sending versions.
Yeah. Well, I'm, as you know, I'm working on the Newtown Sentence album at the moment, and two of them sit here while I mix. And that's good and bad. The good bit is that they're like the first lot. They know exactly what they want.
Yeah.
They know that I know that too. So we're on the same page. I'm doing things that I wouldn't normally do because that's what they want me to do.
Yeah.
And I trust them that it'll end up in the right place at the end.
Yeah.
It sometimes gets frustrating when I'm trying a new idea and they're saying no before I've got to the end of creating what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Oh no, we don't like that. Well, hang on a minute. I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
So that can sometimes cause a bit of tension.
Yeah.
But I generally just let it go. I'm not there to argue. I just want them to have a record that sounds like they want it to sound, and I'm there as quality control to make sure it's good enough. That's kind of it.
I do think that you get to a point where if you get sent a properly made tune, you can do a good mix, and the person that's made the tune will be happy with the fact that you've done a good mix.
Yeah.
It's when you get people that A, make shit tunes, or B, don't know what they want.
Yeah.
Those are the two. For me, those are the two beasts. It's like if you send me a load of shit. Shit in, shit out.
Yeah. Well, the other problem, I think, so there's I'm not going to name names here because it would be bad, but I know some engineers who are very competent mixers and will mix. If you sent them a bunch of stems from a band recording, you know, and vocalist and all the rest of it, they would do a very good mix. But that mix would not work in the commercial space.
Yeah.
They never inject a sound in there, a vibe in there. They don't spot. That's the thing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, that we have to push. That's going to make it something.
Yeah.
They're missing that little bit of, maybe it's a little bit of being a producer rather than a mix engineer.
Yeah.
It'll just be all right.
Yeah.
The drums will sound great. Sounds like a great drum kit sound, great guitar sound, great vocal sound.
Yeah.
But altogether, it's just not.
You see, in my opinion, this is your great strength, is that you're really good at that. you're really good at these big sheened vocals, and you're really good at like you're talking about the stuff you're mixing at the moment. You're good at identifying sounds and not just making it sound like a cohesive mix, but making it sound like a production.
Yeah, you've got to give it something. They're
Yeah.
all,
Yeah, putting that final sheen on a mix, that's something you've always been quite good at. Is you're good at your those big sheeny reverb tails and getting real character out of drums, and I don't know, you've been
character's the word, isn't it? It's giving a song character, making a song stand out, because there's lots of well recorded, well mixed songs.
Yeah.
So make it sound unique is part of the job. If they haven't done that in the recording, you've got to do it in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about price. What you would pay, what is normal, what do people charge for mixing.
So let me ask you.
Yeah.
So a label backed sort of mix coming into you, say, Sean, will you mix this track?
Yep. 500 quid a track.
Yeah.
If a label's paying, because that might sound like a lot to some people, but actually you might have to mix it 10 times.
Yeah.
You might have to do revisions for a couple of weeks. So at that point it doesn't become good value anymore, but you have to set a line somewhere, and that's what I do for that. If it's the same job basically, but for an independent artist, someone that's paying themselves, it's 200 quid, which I think is reasonable. I don't mind doing it for that. I would only take the job on if I liked it.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm mixing stuff I don't like.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then the only other sort of price thing I have is, which is more common now, which is if someone sends you a bunch of stems, like 8 or 10 stereo stems, it's kind of, the mix is there.
Yeah.
You put everything up to Unity, the mix is, they just want me to balance it.
Yeah, using
the monitoring and everything else.
Yeah.
I'm not really mixing at that stage. I'm literally just rebalancing it for her and bouncing it out.
Whereas I won't get out of bed for less than £1,000.
Don't blame you. But yeah,
no, that's useful information. I mean, the difference is now is that, you're not waiting for couriers to deliver, hard drives or whatever from across London. It's sent to you via email. It's a lot quicker, and people are doing a lot of their their deals and their work through Instagram, via Instagram, aren't they now, and social media?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I mean, I think 99% of all my work now comes through Instagram. It just does. That's how people find you.
I know a lot of the students and stuff that we work with. That's that's where a lot of they find a lot of their professionals through Instagram.
Yeah, and we were saying earlier about, if you're looking for a mix engineer, if you're trying to find one for a project that you want to do, that you don't want to do yourself, the idea of sending out a track to multiple people is probably a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if we got given the same stems, we do 2 completely different mixes.
Yeah, do you know what? That'd be quite an interesting.
We should probably never done
experiment. No, we haven't.
But
no.
everyone I know would do a different.
We slag each other's mixes off all the time.
Your mixes are awesome. They are. You get drums so punchy on your mixes.
Yeah,
they're great. Interesting.
Good. Well,
that brings us to the end, I think.
It does. And even if you haven't liked the video, we'd appreciate it if you'd click like anyway, and even better, subscribe to our channel.
That really helps. We also have an Instagram, which is Studio Life 101, and there's a Patreon, and there's a merch stand and a bunch of other stuff, and all the links for that are down there. So
until next time, we'll say sayonara, suckers.
Adios.